You can get your own Planet Peterson t-shirt with multiple designs to choose from by going to my Shopify store. Don't let people mistake you for someone who thinks the earth is flat. Proudly show them you're not an idiot. You can also get your very own Spanky. Check out my artwork too. Thanks, enjoy the video.
To an observed set of data is the priority over simply the development of a model off of observed data and then testing and experimentation because of the timescale of evolution.
Have you heard that bit that Ricky Gervais does where he talks about if all knowledge in the world just was destroyed somehow, whatever, and we had to restart.
Yeah, that's like part of like 3 points he makes, and I hate them all.
Yeah, he says science, we would rediscover all of that, but no religion would come back in the form in which it is written or whatever. Like maybe people would again believe in some sort of god or many gods. I mean, I think they kind of obviously would because that happened throughout Earth's history. And that's just like to kind of demonstrate that like you can tell that the science is objective and true, and the other thing seems to be more man-made. Now, I'm not here to argue exactly that specific thing. I just wanted to know if you're like familiar with that.
I'm familiar with the argument, and you might have expected this response, but so the presupposition there is that science is objective and true, which I totally disagree with. Like, it's what I do professionally. I entirely disagree with that statement. The second presupposition there is that man made God. And I think that's entirely wrong as well. I think God made man. So presuppositionally, I couldn't disagree any more with
But you
two,
think there are many
statements.
false gods that were obviously made by man.
Right. Man will definitely make up a bunch of weird shit for sure. That's true. That part of it's true. Yes, man will worship rocks and birds and demons and all kind of weird shit. Yes, absolutely.
Well, somebody else could just say that back to you.
Right. I understand.
Yeah, I believe in God, but the Christians are wrong.
Right. Of course. I mean, at the end of the day, and I should be more sensational than this, but it is going to be about what we believe. But I believe that the God of the Bible created this reality, and we have the historical scientific account of this event, Adam flood down to today. I mean, obviously that's what I do with my research. In my opinion, there's far more evidence in support of this than even Darwinian evolution. Like, I think the evidence, first off, the Big Bang, I 100% think it's dead. We've talked about that before. It's a shit theory. It sucked from the beginning, and it's been falsified by science. And evolution is also a shit theory, and it's being falsified by science. They're done. In 200, let me ask you this, okay? Honest question. In 200 years, you think they're going to look at the Big Bang and Darwinian evolution and be like, I can't believe they had that shit so close. They really fucking nailed that for that long ago? Or what are the chances you think that they're going to look back and go, that's crazy they believed that?
Zero. Because, for evolution, for the past 150 years, everything we've discovered has confirmed what Darwin thought.
That's not true.
I can't think of a single thing that disproved any. This isn't the conversation I came up here to have, but we can do this for a couple minutes. I have no problem with that.
Okay, so to finish my argument, the Big Bang is the newest iteration of humans trying to figure out how the hell the universe got here from an Earth flying through space. We have very little context. We have very little idea. It's in the height of hubris and insanity to me to think that they looked through glass and they figured it out. That's great. Positive thinking. That's fine. There was detractors when it came up. The name Big Bang came from Fred Hoyle. He was mocking the idea that everything came from nothing. It keeps changing. There's all these different iterations of it. It was a single point. It's a quantum fluctuation. No idea how it happened. It flies in the face of physics. It's an illogical belief system. It's riddled with holes. The reason why we have the inflationary theory and dark energy and dark matter, and now we have fully formed massive black holes and fully formed galaxies. The science isn't supporting it. The Big Bang. I know you're not ready to give up on it. It is done. The Big Bang was falsified by better science. So that's going to that's the issue with the question. Science is going to come back and it's going to discover the same thing. No, Eric, they're not going to come back and to think that the universe came from nothing and became more ordered over time and all this shit happened randomly in a universe governed by entropy. They're not going to come back up with it. They're coming up with a new theory. Multiverse, vamping universes, subset of a different reality, but they're not going to come up with the Big Bang because it's that theory of all of the ones that we've had is going to have the shortest shelf life and be the most ridiculed over time.
Man, I disagree with that so much, because how did the Big Bang start? It started by the observation that, everywhere we look, the light is red shifted, and the farther we look, the more red shifted it is. And so what they could do was tell, it starts pretty simply, they could tell that the universe is expanding, and I know you don't doubt that. And what they did was they just extrapolated backwards. If we look at the current rate of expansion, when does it all collapse together? And then we got a date out of that.
That was wrong, or is wrong.
Well, I'm not aware of any evidence that says the date is wrong. I mean, the mature galaxies, I don't find that to be...
That's evidence. That's the definition of evidence.
Yeah,
that's the definition. That is evidence. Like, it's like this. You go, I was born in 1977. Okay, it's like I tell you I was born in 1977. If you go back to 1978 and I'm a fully ass grown man, you're like, you weren't born in 1977. That's what they did. It's the beginning of the universe.
Yeah, but
that's the evidence. You need no more evidence. There's no greater evidence than there's no formation. It's fully formed. A process they thought took billions of years happened in hundreds of millions. That is the evidence. Don't say there's no evidence. That's the evidence. They were wrong.
I don't think anybody said it took billions of years for them to form. But even if they did, if the universe is a billion years older than we thought it was, that doesn't mean that the Big Bang is false.
It depends on what part of the Big Bang you want to salvage. The 13.8 billion years is definitely... can you concede here tonight that they're at least going to have to change the time frame on it?
Yeah. So actually, this is really great, because this is actually what I came up here to say. I have no issue with that they might change the date, but I did the math on this. I can't remember. In order for it to match, it may be that we're off by 5%, something like that. But in your worldview, the current model is off by, it's something like 700 million %, right? I don't think that that's going to happen.
What about my worldview? I didn't understand that corollary.
That the universe is only about 6,500 years old.
Well, it doesn't matter. Right now, it can be 5,000 years old, Eric. It doesn't matter. I mean, humans started keeping a record 5,000 years ago. Prior to that, we have no idea how long anything is. And all we see in the universe is a fully formed universe. So it doesn't, like you could say 10,000 or 20,000 or 100 billion or 100 zillion years. We don't have any idea when or how it formed. And at this point, we don't even see formation. This is the problem. There's no formation. What they proposed, the mechanism of creation, hydrogen and helium collapsing into stars exploding into black holes creating, all of this matter, bigger stars forming bigger black holes, bigger galaxies. Eventually, you end up with something like a spiral galaxy. This didn't. They expected this to. It just didn't happen. It's just it's a fully formed copy and paste. It's simulation all day. It's like copy and paste. Milky Way universe is thousands of them as far as we can see. There's no formation. It's like. They had a theory. They had a theory. This is what's happening. Let me see if I can do an analogy of this.
Pretty sure those galaxies they found are not as large as the Milky Way galaxy is.
There's galaxies that are bigger than the Milky Way.
Okay.
There's galaxies that are Celia's in here saying they're not fully mature. They're fully mature, fully formed, massive Milky Way galaxy clones is what they're saying. As far as we can see, it's fully formed. And this becomes a problem because
then what explain? So how do I say this? Is that really enough for you to say the math that they worked out based on the redshift is therefore false? Have you ever? I've never heard anybody come up with an argument that says, well, the math behind the cosmology is false based on expansion rates or whatever. There were attempts, like plasma theory said, no, it's not really redshift. It's just a weird effect that plasma has on it. And Fred Hoyle's idea of a steady state. I couldn't tell you why we know that Fred Hoyle was wrong off the top of my head, but that idea did not survive. But
yeah, his steady state universe didn't work. I agree, but there was a problem with the model. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head either, but there was something with it, and he even recanted towards the end. He was like, I don't know what he went to. I don't know if he was going back to Big Bang or something else, but I agree with you on that note. Okay, so this is Celia's asking me. She's an astrophysicist in training. This is February 28th, 2023. This is Penn State University. I'm not cherry picking. It's the first one that came up. Discovery of massive galaxies defies prior understanding of the universe. Just quickly, 6 massive galaxies discovered in the early universe are updating what scientists previously understood about the origin of the galaxy and the universe. These objects are way more massive than anyone expected, said Joel Leha, assistant professor of astronomy at Penn State. We expected to find only tiny young baby galaxies at this point in time, but we've discovered galaxies as mature as our own and what was previously understood to be the dawn of the universe.
Oh, cool.
And this is just the start of it. And then it's let's look at this one here. This came later because they were trying to get rid of this. Thousands of Milky Way clone. Let's see if I got that. James Webb. This is September of this year. Last year, sorry. So James Webb's telescope spots thousands of Milky Way look-alike galaxies that shouldn't exist swarming across the early universe. It's a thing. It's a thing, and it's not a thing because science doesn't want it to be a thing because it's devastating. And what sucks about that is that people all the time they come in my life. This is a good thing about science. When they're wrong, they just say we're wrong. We come up with a new theory. Bullshit. It's dead. The theory, it's done. It's like this is what's great about this. You're young. You're gonna live longer than me probably. There's gonna be a day where you're gonna go, holy shit, that fucking lunatic was right. And I'm just there because of my bias and I'm a contrarian. Like I'm already there. I can't say the same for Darwinian evolution. It's not done yet, but it's next.
You're next.
Yeah.
So like what I would
is based on anti-truth. It's always going to over time. It's going to be exposed. If you actually have better instrumentation, you're going to realize that there was problems with it. And that's what's happening. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. I'll just say one thing real quick, and then I want to get to the real reason I came up here, but it's related to what we're talking about here. So again, the Big Bang started with those observations of the redshift, and then they extrapolated what the age of the universe would be from that, basically. Now, these galaxy observations, those are really interesting. They're cool. They're fascinating. Now, either like one of two things, I guess, here is possible. Somehow the math somehow we were tricked by our observations about the redshift because I can't do the math, but I trust that the physics community for the last 100 years has been doing that. And they've been like, yeah, I mean, like we can see what's going on. We didn't think it was billions of years old beforehand and then tried to make a model that fit it. That's just what the data told us. Now, if these observations definitely contradict that, then we need to figure out how to make new measurements to determine the age of the Earth. Because photos of galaxies doesn't tell us how old the universe is. We need to figure that out. And nobody's come up with anything for that. So if you could do that, and then it could be verified with further tests and predictions, like I would say the CMB and things like that validated the predictions of the Big Bang model, then that would be extremely compelling. Or the other possibility is just something about galaxy formation works with the current Big Bang model. There just are things about galaxy formation that we don't yet know. So that would basically be the opposite. Either the galaxies are proving that the Big Bang is wrong, and so we don't know, or the timeline of the Big Bang, I guess, is wrong, and we don't know what it is in our science and in our observations and in our measurements to account for that, or it's the other way around. Basically, that's what I would say about that.
Oh, there's other options too, but I mean, I understand why.
Yeah, possibly. We don't know what we don't know. Also, anyways, here's why I came up here for that. What's up?
I know, like, you always regret when you get on the line with me because I just keep going. But The other option is, and this is what's remarkable, is that the universe was created fully formed, which is nobody in materialist science can believe that. No fucking way. It had to have formed through these processes. We've never seen a star form. We've never seen a planet form, but we know it had to have formed, because in order to have a universe that exists in the way that it does without a creator, you need to have it formed through natural processes. So there's been a concerted effort for a very long time to try to explain this reality through purely material processes, and that seems to be, every attempt has seemed to fall apart over time. And so what's the flip side of this coin about the early universe being teeming with massive galaxies is there's one scientist that I know of in the world that predicted this. One single scientist, an astrophysicist named Jason Lisle, who was absolutely hated by science because he's a young Earth creationist. He wrote on his website, because he's not allowed. He's like, oh, peer reviewed. Yeah, right. No, we're not in that club. He wrote that specifically predicting that they'd find fully formed galaxies, and everybody be freaking out why this would be, because he believed in the biblical creation. So the flip side of this coin is that they built this telescope and they looked out and they looked at the beginning of the universe and they were surprised by what they saw because it didn't fit with the Big Bang model. It totally confirmed biblical creation. So this is like, if you were ever buying stock in something like intelligent design, this is a good time to get in. And if you want to like sell, this is a good time to sell materialism. I mean, shit, they just proved the universe isn't locally real in 2023. Everything's changing. So you're intelligent. You're very intelligent. You're just very intelligent. You've studied science very thoroughly. You believe what you believe, and we can talk about evolution or whatever. But in particular, the Big Bang, that's changing, and eventually it'll change, and we know in science enough people prove it or whatever, and then you can go, yeah, we come up with a new theory. But in the meantime, it was on shaky ground when they needed dark matter and dark energy and the inflation event. Now to me, this is the death nail. So did you want to talk about evolution at all, or do you want to get out of here while the getting's good?
No, I haven't even brought up the reason I came up here, but it's related to this like Big Bang stuff. So I wanted to talk about like young Earth creationism. So, because I thought about this and I thought that this was particularly interesting. So it has to do with that Ricky Gervais quote or whatever. So do you at least agree that, how do I want to say this? Do you at least agree that if what the Bible says about the universe is true, then we could rediscover that? Like, if all knowledge was lost, we'd never figure out that Jesus existed, because his body isn't here anymore or anything like that, right? But if what you believe about nature and reality, according to what the Bible says, is true, we'd be able to rediscover those truths. I would assume you'd agree with that, right?
Yeah, I would agree that. I disagree with the current, the conventional paradigm and the time frame that it operates in. So, if we were able to prove that it was 7,500 years old, or 14 billion years old, or 4 billion years old, or whatever it is, if we get to the point where we can prove that and it's actually empirically proven, then in theory we would be able to recapitulate that. Yes, in theory we'd find that again.
Okay, so my question is, whenever people argue that the universe or Earth or whatever are not billions of years old, what they do is they try to like come up with examples where they're like, well, because the moon is getting this far away from us every year, then that would put the moon and Earth touching only 2 billion years ago.
Which is a problem.
I can't think of one for like the Big Bang for like the actual like timeline or whatever exactly. But my question is, okay, what evidence, if the Bible didn't even exist, if we knew nothing, we don't even need to assume that, really. I guess we could go with what we currently know. What that we currently know, specifically apart from the Bible, specifically says all of this is only a few thousand years old. Because so far what I only hear is, well, it's definitely not billions.
So you've I think unintentionally elucidated a really paradoxical situation that we're in. It's like I was born in a house, and I'm like in this house one day, and I'm like, I wonder when this fucking house was built. Huh. Well, I could look at the studs, and I could look at the foundation, and I could look at the windows. I could look at a receipt. Okay, that shows when things were going. I would have a very hard time figuring out when my house was born. So what I would have to do is start asking people, do you know when this house was born? And if somebody somewhere said that house was born in 1924, which actually has happened with the house that we live in, it was built by the Mills and they brought this thing up, it was 1920, we know this. Then you could go, okay, that's something that I could go off of. It makes sense. There's even whatever. That's great. Outside of a historical endeavor, I'm using a bunch of presuppositional, anecdotal pieces of evidence to try to figure out when this house got here. Well, it's green. Green was in the 70s. It was like 77, but that could have been painted on. Okay, this kind of would. We don't know. And we have the version of this with the Earth flying through space and humankind beginning. Civilization began 5,000 years ago. Whatever. But it's a whole other conversation we can get into. I love that conversation. Reading, writing, arithmetic, civilization 5,000 years ago. Why? 190,000 years. They figured out agriculture. They didn't know how to do agriculture before that? Sure, whatever. 5,000 years ago, humans start telling the story. And immediately they go, there was a flood, like aliens, something. We're here. I'm in this house, and I don't know how old it is. We don't know how old it is. So it's this foregone conclusion that it's 4.5 billion years old. Well, if you start looking at it, it's like we don't have any rocks on you know that there's no rocks on the evidence for the Earth being 4.5 billion years old is largely based on rocks being delivered to the Earth from extraterrestrial,
meteorites.
Rocks.
Yeah, but there are rocks on like in the Canadian Shield and in Australia that have been dated to like right at 4 billion years old. Yeah,
right.
Very high threes, really close to 4.
Right. So we're like relying on rocks coming from space, and do we know how those formed? Maybe look, we just don't know. We don't know outside of a historical record. And so the version of the house record that I was talking about, I think is what the Bible is. People who experienced this or had ancestors that experienced it that told the story. And that to me, I know you immediately disqualify it because you don't think it's scientific, but that is as good of evidence to me, if not better, than assuming that rocks formed in this certain way and decayed at this certain time or had this percentage at the beginning. Now, I agree that radiometric dating is the best piece of evidence in favor of deep time, 100 or 4.5 billion years. Absolutely, I agree with that, and we could have that discussion. As far as the age of the universe, 14 billion years, that is wrong. That the math is wrong. Whatever, they got a number. They're certainly not radiometrically dating the universe, right? That's not where they're getting this from. This is assumptions. Right. I don't think we have any idea how old the Earth is, and this is the last thing I'll say. And I'm sorry for the rant. I was just teaching a young man was in here earlier. He's like a 20-year-old or whatever. He's going to school for this. He didn't know about Lyell and Huxley and Darwin. I know you've heard me rant on this before. They set out to build the natural sciences. They were ethnologists. We've talked about that before. Huxley hated Christianity. Lyell hated Christianity. They needed to figure out how the Grand Canyon formed. It was either a lot of water at one time or a little bit of water over a long time. They came up with uniformitarianism. Lyell said specifically he was trying to free science from Moses. Darwin needed tadpoles to get to humans. That took a very long amount of time. They were all buddies, European aristocracy. They had no idea how to measure this. Their presupposition was, in order to sell this to people, we need a lot of time. And so, yes, currently there is evidence in favor of deep time. Back then, there was no evidence for it, and they believed it was there because they needed it. And I think science has worked backwards from that. So am I going to be the least bit surprised as the Big Bang falls apart that assumptions with radiometric dating fall apart? Not at all. That's kind of where that's where my bias is lying. But I don't think we know how old the universe is. I don't think we know how old the Earth is.
Wait, but you do think you know how old it is?
I believe in the biblical account of 7,500 years, and there's evidence in favor of that. Yeah.
So what evidence that specifically points to? I feel like you didn't answer my question at all. What evidence?
It's possible.
7,500. I've always heard 6,500, but whatever. But what evidence, other than going backwards with the lineages in the Bible, what evidence gets you to 7,500 years old or 6,500 years old?
Great. I'll try. I guess maybe I didn't understand the question, or I got lost in my own rant. First thing, Septuagint chronology versus Masoretic text. That's the difference. Septuagint predates Masoretic. Masoretic is untrustworthy in a lot of ways. That is where King James and NIV and a lot of those come from. Masoretic text.
Yeah, but I was asking for other than the Bible.
I know, but just you said 6,000 to 7,000, 7,500 years. This is good for you to know.
Oh,
6,000 years, Masoretic text, 4,000 years for the flood, according to Masoretic. Septuagint, 7,500 for creation, 5,300 for the flood. This is important because we have the pyramids that are 4,800 years old and cuneiform, etc. Okay, what evidence in favor of 7,500 years old? I would say the first one is, I think this is a strong one. Have you looked at the human population growth percentage over time?
I have before, yeah.
What have you seen about it? I'm just going to show you this really quick.
I don't know, that it's flat for an extremely long time. I've seen these things where they assume, well, if you just start with 2 people and you just grow it at whatever rate, but that assumes that past population increases were the same as they were like either in the 20th century or whatever. And I don't know why you would assume that.
Okay, well, this isn't me assuming anything. This is our world and data. This isn't. I don't use
Yeah,
creation
I'm on that
websites.
website right now.
Okay, this is the chart of the size of world population over the long run. This starts at 10,000 BC, and it goes to today. And according to official science, official data, the world population was around 4 million in 10,000 BC, and it stayed that way until between 4 and 6,000 BC, and it started to increase, 1,700 versus 0.04% per year, and then you end up with, this is just an exponential growth chart. So if you want to believe in your paradigm and your worldview, anatomically modern Homo sapien evolved how long ago? You know this.
Around 300,000 years ago.
Right. So 190 to 300,000 years ago. So according to your belief system, the conventional paradigm in your worldview of 300,000, so you had 290,000 years of basically extinction level, near extinction level population.
That's not near
that just
extinction
roved
level.
at that number.
We were wild animals. Wild animals don't. There is a natural carrying capacity, and we only lived in Africa for almost all of that time.
Right. So, okay. And like I told that young man that was on here earlier, I know you don't feel this way because you represent science and your professors have talked to you about these things with certitude and you're very convinced of your worldview. But in my worldview, you would need to convince to me a good reason that humankind was stagnant, human population was stagnant for 295,000 years and just happened to start to actually increase exactly when the Bible said Noah and his family got off the ark. Exactly, 4,000 to 6,000 BC.
Well, that's not hard to do. I mean, for most of that time, we were basically wild animals, and we
on what
only
evidence,
lived,
Eric?
and we only lived in one small part of the world. Now, when humans,
Based on what evidence? Can you tell me the evidence for that?
that we originated in Africa, and that no population just
evidence.
appears all over the world.
Right, but that's not evidence. That's just you saying things.
Well, right,
I
but
want to
we
know
have
the evidence of 295,000 years of whatever number you think of humans there are hanging out only in Africa.
well, that would be the fossil record. We have not found any. So this would be correlated or corroborated or whatever with molecular studies, because a lot of the clockwork, so to speak, is done with those molecular studies. But it's also corroborated by.
Clock?
Sorry.
You're talking about the molecular clock.
Yeah. But it's also supported by no human remains that are older than 70,000 years or whatever have been found outside of Africa. And it also
That's
goes.
not true.
Yeah, it is.
So you said there's no human remains outside of 70,000 years outside of Africa.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true, but keep talking.
Those would be the main ones, I suppose. But to get into that, we'd have to be like, well, how do we know radiometric dating is accurate, and how do we know that molecular clock analyses are accurate. So I don't want to have multiple debates at the same time. But we do have an explanation for that. And then the other thing was, how is it that the population grows when the Bible comes around or whatever? Well, when the story of us, our species, when we became more sedentary and when we invented agriculture and when we came up with a way to produce enough calories to sustain big populations for
Eric,
the first
I don't
time.
care about your story. You have to give me that I know the story that they didn't farm for 295,000 years. You have no evidence for that claim. It is literally made up out of whole cloth. I'm sorry to be an asshole.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. But that's also not what you asked me. You said how can that? You asked me how can these things match? It's no surprise that people invent like religions and tell stories and mythologies of any kind once they settle in and begin a civilization. So yes, the population increases are corresponding with those stories. That actually does make perfect logical sense. Like it's not inconsistent.
Okay. Earliest modern human fossil found outside of Africa is 210,000 years old.
Is it a
skull unearthed
it's not a
Greece.
Homo sapiens though. Or was it found like around the Dead Sea? What does it say it is?
It says it's Homo sapien.
Oh, really?
Let's see here.
So was it found like around? I'm assuming it was found probably somewhere in the area of like the Dead Sea, probably, which is connected to Africa.
The more complete skull appears to be Neanderthal, but the other shows clear characters such as rounded back to the skull, diagnostic of modern humans. That's just wrong. I mean, I'm not trying to be an asshole. That's just not true.
Okay, well, that says we don't know if it was a Homo sapiens or a Neanderthal. What was the name of that? I want to look that up. That's interesting.
That's it's a BBC earliest. I googled earliest modern human found outside Africa. This is Paul Rincon, science editor, BBC News website. Researchers have found the earliest example of our species, modern humans, outside Africa. I don't know what you're looking for. And also, Neanderthal seems to be, I mean, it's obviously reproduced with us. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But
it's a different species of human.
That's just the first one I looked up. I know in my research, I just know that's wrong. So I said that. So the other thing is, though, like, the reason I said that is, like, I'm not interested in the Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye fucking magic show. I'm done with it. Like, I'm going to debate those assholes. I'm going to debate them because it's just they've been literally selling this as though there's science behind it, and it's going to be exactly what you just told me. Well, humans didn't farm for 295,000 years because they didn't build plants, they didn't build trees, they didn't have whatever the story is. There's no evidence for that. Like, go find me the evidence of the story you just told me, and there is no evidence that humans didn't farm for 295,000 years.
There's no evidence that they did.
What is your point?
Well, I am kind of wondering the same thing. I'm not really sure what the like.
Here's
your
problem.
First problem would be there's no evidence that much time exists, and I would say there's absolutely very strong evidence that much time exists, and strong evidence that we've been around for that long, as well. I mean, we'd have to kind of start there.
Somebody just said Win Peters. Okay, yeah, we can start there if you'd like to. Because, again, how we got here, you said evidence for a 7,000-year-old Earth, and I said the human population growth, and then you brought up some straw man-y version of what Christians normally tell you with the two people or whatever, and I showed you the world in data. I think you know that I'm not going to pull up an Eric Hovind argument here. I pulled up Our World in Data, and I showed you that between 4 and 6,000 BC, for those keeping score at home, is 6 to 8,000 BC, exactly when we think the flood and creation happened. You have humankind going from a stagnant I've heard 100,000 to 4 million. There's a variant range there that human population sustained between 100,000 and 4 million for 295,000 years. And then they figured out how to water plants. Again, these are anatomically modern Homo sapiens with the same brain today, according to researchers. If you did the Encino Man thing and you showed them up today, they could get on TikTok. Science wants you to believe that for 295,000 years, they didn't think about watering fucking plants. And I ask for evidence, and I'm not going to get any because there is no evidence of that. And that is a remarkable claim. That is and I've said, like, I know you disagree with me, and a lot of people on your side think that you guys have the high ground. You're asking me to believe that for 295,000 years, anatomically modern humans couldn't figure out agriculture. And then they did, and we went from the pyramids to AI in 5,000 years. And for the prior 295,000 years, they were just running around chasing woolly mammoths or whatever. There's no evidence for it. It's a wild belief system. It's just a wild belief system.
Well, I would say there's nothing but evidence for it. So
go ahead and show me the evidence.
I think
You said nothing but evidence, and you haven't provided any yet. Go ahead. Let's go get the evidence. If there's nothing but it, there should be plenty. Fall out of your chair and bring me some evidence.
We have huge numbers of sites of like mammoth. I don't know what you call them, like not kill pits or whatever, but like that humans hunted with crude stone tools for a very long time. We have huge numbers of artifacts and not fossil sites, but like bone sites or whatever that clearly show that, for example. But like real quick, so you pull up this Our World in Data thing, right? So unfortunately, this is gonna. I'm not trying to sound rude, but I wrote down.
Rude to me. It's no problem.
So this is what I wrote down. The source you pulled up is telling you, if we look at that graph, that the world population was 4 million. It's actually more than that around that time because it says 4 million in 10,000 BC. So let's just leave it at 4 million. That's fine. The source you're saying it shows that we had a world population of 4 million and then it rapidly grew. That in no way supports the idea that a single family survived a global flood. Like, this is the thing I'm talking about where it's like, well, this thing says that the Earth can't be more than 2 billion years old, therefore it's a couple thousand years old. That's a completely like an insane leap. And to use a site that says there were millions of humans and then they rapidly grew to support a story that says a single family are the descendants of every single person alive today, and that only happened 4,000 years ago, is like totally asinine.
Why? I don't understand the logic. Are you saying because 4 million people versus 8 people is the problem?
Yeah, that's a huge problem.
Right. At a standard rate of humans' reproductive capacity for measured time, whatever this is, which obviously there's some pushback on that, 2%, 0.5%, whatever. You get from what is that last bottleneck that they actually had? There's a very recent bottleneck that they said that we were down to 10,000. When was that?
The Toba eruption?
When was that?
I think it was 70,000 years ago.
Right. So human bottleneck. 10,000 people. Let me see really quick. That number at 4 million. Let's see what it say. Toba catastrophe. Approximately 75 years ago, proposed that human population was reduced to perhaps 10,000 to 30,000 individuals. So we end up with somewhere between 10,000 and 4 million people. I mean, we can do 75,000 years ago. No more than that, though. And again, a lot of estimates are a million. You're not going to like this, but the specific intention of the people that would have gotten off the boat, which would have been 2, 4, 6, 8 of them, was to refill the world, multiply and refill the world. This wasn't standard operating procedure. We're playing Minecraft and we only have chickens for 4 people. It was exponential reproduction intentionally to repopulate the earth. So you would have had, there's a lot of estimates on this, but you would have had rampant, quick acceleration of the human population from 8 to, I think some of the rough numbers can be like 100,000 people in like 120 years. So you just would have had, 12 people. Think about the book of Bible, the book of Genesis, when it says Jacob had 12 children, and then they had 12 children. You had these tribes very quickly. So if you start having, like, this is just an easy thing to do. Let's do this live. I'll bring my calculator up really quick.
So, like, I hate to interrupt, but actually I love to do it because
please do.
The problem is, like, this source says that this source is telling us 8 billion people came from 4 million people 6,000 years ago. And you're saying 8 billion people came from 8 people 4,000 years ago. This source is not validating anything you're arguing.
Because you want that to be a smaller number. That's
you
all,
need it
right?
to be a smaller number. And this source doesn't support that idea.
Okay, just watch this with me real quick. 12, because again, this is my book that I'm getting this history from. And according to the Bible, they were supposed to reproduce exponentially, and they actually have some of the accounts of how many children they were having. They were having a dozen children per generation, basically, from landing off of the boat.
With child mortality rates probably of 30 to 40%, yeah.
Well, that's another conversation. That's one generation. Okay, we're going to do the next generation. So this is 40 years, 1,700 people.
Yeah.
This is 60 years, 20,000 people. This is 80 years, 248,000 people.
Yes, you're
This
assuming
is
nobody
100
dies.
years. Okay, give some margin of error. In 100 years, we're at 2.985 million people. So let's cut that in half. Half the people.
No. Because with this, with what you're doing here, you're not allowing for anybody to ever die. Is one problem when you multiply the numbers like that. Or wait, is that the case?
It's not the case because according to the Bible, they were living 260 years. I don't have to account for them dying in that time.
Okay. Now I'm trying to think. Is that actually are you actually adding up past generations when you multiply like that? I actually don't know because I'm not brilliant with the math or whatever. But we're not taking into account
that's an exponential growth. That's what happens.
Yeah.
That's only 12. There's a lady in Russia that had 70 children like 100 like 80 years ago.
I know. That's pretty messed up. But like when you do it that way, like, yeah, you
It's
can
not
explode.
messed up if you're trying to repopulate the earth, Eric.
Having 70 children? I don't know.
That was a normal, broken-ass human that lived 80 years, according to the Bible. Again, this is my source, the Bible. They were living 500 years before the flood. These were superhumans because they weren't genetically and tropically. It's actually brilliant. I should add this in my argument for this. The genetic bottleneck that actually happened, that they're like, there was a genetic bottleneck to about 10,000 people. Yeah, it was the flood. And it was more recently than they said, of course. Before they were living hundreds of years at that point. They weren't genetically mutated. They didn't have the aggregations. They were living longer. I understand, like, you don't believe that, but according to this historical account that got this date right, they just having only 12 children, and that's only per generation. And people aren't going to like this, but they were having all kind of inbreeding.
That assumes that all 12 of the, when you do that, you have to assume all of the 12 people, all of my 12 children, all have 12 children. And first of all, not everybody is lucky enough to get the chance. Second of all, the child mortality rates back then were astronomically high. So they're
back then at the flood that you don't believe in, with the superhumans that you don't believe in.
I mean, you can just sit there and say they were superhumans and they didn't die when they were young, but like, what evidence do we have of that? We do have very good evidence of high child mortality rates in the present, but I kind of, look, I'm not trying to run away from what we're currently talking about, but it's not what I came up here to talk about, which is what evidence do we have that the Earth is only a few thousand years old?
That's what we're... Okay, I'll put a pin on this one, or I'll put a bow on this one. Sorry, I misspoke. I was showing you that in 100 years we can easily get that's 3 million. Cut that in a third. That's 1 million. That's the number. Like that, our world in data says 4 million. A lot of people say 1 million. That we could. I've researched this tremendously.
But that's so much different than 8.
Yeah, but we go from 8 to 1 million in 100 years, Eric. It's not so much different.
Assuming that everybody has 12 children and that none of them...
They probably had way more. But
No,
they probably had...
I doubt that.
You can't say you doubt something that I'm talking to you about that you don't believe. A Russian woman A normal human had 70 children in her life. These people were repopulating the earth. They were living hundreds of years. They may have had hundreds of children, literally. They may 12 is probably
hundreds of children.
Okay, you said you're not good at math. If a woman can have 70 children in 80 years, how many children can somebody that lives 500 years have, Eric?
Well, a lot, but there's so much assumed into that, and there's so much baggage. You don't take a statistical outlier and say that explains the majority of your data or whatever. Like Robert Wadlow was 9 feet tall, therefore everybody back then was 9 feet tall. That's not actually like an argument. Like it's like all you're doing is saying it's theoretically possible. Too. Like we know that it can happen. Therefore, that is what did happen writ large. Okay. And I would say
we have to not touch the Giants conversation because that's going to be a whole other thing. So my point, and then we can go on to the 7,000 year thing more. My point is that, and I understand, like it's funny, obviously your people are in here and they think that they think that me saying this, is I can't say this thing. It's too taboo. It's not possible. If the Bible happened, I'm explaining to Eric what would have happened according to the biblical narrative. So if you don't believe in the Bible, then if I say that people lived 300 years, you don't believe that, obviously. I understand that you're not going to.
Well, I need evidence of it.
You need evidence of 300-year-old people.
Yeah. Other than the Bible, because any religion could point to their religious text and say, well, it says blank, therefore.
I understand that. Blank. I understand that. So I have probably about as much evidence of this as you do of them farming for 295,000 years. The evidence for humans living that long is the thought experiment. You're going to love, science loves models, that we're genetically entropically degrading. We've been aggregating. I know I don't think you believe in genetic entropy, which is a funny thing to deny.
You're an actual idiot. Sorry.
So we have been measuring the rates of mutation increase every generation, and it's aggregating. Obviously, it's what happens. You don't lose mutations. They keep piling up. More mutations equals more problems, right? The reason that inbreeding is such a problem is because you have redundant mutations and you don't have recombination to pull up a better genome to fix broken gene code. Over time, your genetic makeup, our genetic makeup is getting worse, and it's going to continue to get worse. The idea that Adam would have been the perfect gene code, and there's evidence in favor of Adam, which we can get to in a second, and that we would be aggregating mutations is supported at least through the model of the Bible. I've never said it that way, but again, science loves to use models of planet formation, etc. It goes like this. Adam is perfect. Eve is perfect. They start having children, inbreeding. Well, they have their children. It's not inbreeding. Mutations immediately start. Generation after generation after generation, mutations start aggregating. Eventually, God says, no more reproduction with your in-laws because you're getting too many mutations, and you're going to start the human genome is going to dissolve. So he actually outlawed inbreeding. But for a long time, it was the whole first part of the book of the Genesis. It was okay to inbreed because there was so little genetic mistakes that it hadn't aggregated to a point where we actually have a major problem. Now, according to the Bible, which is a 3,500-year-old book, the lifespans immediately start decreasing. Adam lives longest, there's an outlier. I think Methuselah lives a little bit longer. Each lifespan starts to live less long. Why is that? That's weird. This shouldn't be that way. Genetic mutations. Then you have the event of the flood, which is a wild bottleneck, which we actually understand that bottlenecking causes rampant genetic. It causes what heterogeneity? Is that what you call it? And also rampant mutations, because you end up confining down to only 8 or 10,000 people, or whatever it is. At the moment of the flood, human lifespans go from in the 500s to the 200s. Right after the flood, the Bible doesn't say anything.
I thought Noah died at 120. or
No, it was
125?
500 and something. He was 100.
Oh wait, yeah, no. What? Oh, who am I thinking of? Sorry, yeah, that was
Abraham.
stupid. Abraham. Okay, my bad.
And
yeah,
Isaac.
Okay. Okay.
Which, by the way,
I'm
I'll
so
finish-
confused.
I'm sorry.
If Noah lived to be 500 years old, then how come his descendants stopped living that long? If he was one of those people that survives so long, as the Bible says, and he and his descendants who have his genes are on the boat, and those are the only people that are around, that actually doesn't make any sense to me.
They lived. I'm going to pull up the table of nations here. They lived about the same amount of time. The sons did, but their offspring immediately was dramatically reduced. Dramatically reduced. The next layer of genetic mutations kicked in. Let me see if I can find it really fast. Septuagint, just because I can speak correctly here. Here it is. Septuagint dates. Okay, let me pull this.
I gotta
this is
stop
kinda
reading
cool.
the chat. It's triggering me.
Yeah, don't. Hey guys,
No,
by
it's
the
just
way,
this one guy. He's so fucking stupid.
if you're a Christian and you're in Eric's chat and you're mean, I disown you. Honest to God.
No, it's not even that. It's just oh god, the stuff that it's not even directed at me. It's just I see stuff. I'm like, why would a person that can think say something like that? Oh,
Okay, here this is the Septuagint timeline that I was talking about. So this is the Masoretic text and the Septuagint text. So the big difference here is going to be between the begetting age and the Septuagint, 230 years before Adam had a son. Masoretic text, 130 years. That takes 100 years off the timeline. This is why the Masoretic text has such a younger date. This is the 6,000 year everybody incorrectly says. This is a 7,500 year date. Okay, let's look here. So lifespan, 930, 912, 905, 910, 895. So it's decreasing. Then Methuselah goes bonkers. He's totally out. Methuselah's 895. Jared 962. Oh, there's Methuselah 969. Lamech down to 753. Noah was 950, and then what happens is Shem. Why doesn't it have his total age, lifespan? He was 100 years before he had his child, and 500 years after the flood. So he was 600 years. Arphaxad, the next generation, 430, so shorter. The next generation, 330. Then down to 370, 209, 207, 200, 129.
Yep.
This is
Why,
how
though?
quickly, because of the bottleneck and then rampant inbreeding mutations.
but that doesn't make any sense. When you bottleneck, you have less genetic variation. And if Noah was 500 years old when he started building the boat. I don't know why I said 120. I'm such an idiot sometimes. But if he lived so long and it was only his family on that boat, a small number of people, then you actually concentrate those longevity genes. So that actually just doesn't make any sense.
Right, but the longevity genes, which is fine. I mean, even the Amish have those. But what you also have is only 8 people, so you lose. If I'm wrong about this, you can help me to know this. But so I'm not symmetrical. I've a bunch of genetic issues I've had, unfortunately. My wife is genetically perfect. Our children are genetically perfect. It's unbelievable. I showed my child on here earlier. You wouldn't believe that this child had anything to do with me. What happens? During recombination, you get where I have broken or faulty genes. If your mate has good genes there, then the good genes take priority, and you end up with fixing of the mutation, right? Which is why, even though we are genetically entropically degrading, it's not happening rapidly. It's kind of slowing. It's a very slight, gradual descent. Now,
Recombination is when
inbreeding-
your own chromosome, like you only pass on half of your genes. Recombination is how your own chromosomes intermix your DNA.
for when it reproduces with your mate.
Recombination isn't combining yours and your wife's DNA. It's a reshuffling of the DNA that you have because you only pass on half of it.
I gotta just I don't read the comments normally. This George Washer guy has been in my live for about 3 hours, and he just said another VOR Yap session.
Well, then what are you doing here
I
for
said,
3 hours?
My name is VOR. I do this. I talk a lot. I have a show. Sometimes I have guests. A lot of times I just talk for the whole show. You're welcome to go. I don't know what you expect in my life. I'm going to talk. Anyways, I didn't read the comments. So the idea, okay, Have you seen the Whitakers in the hills of wherever, like the Appalachian Hills, the Whitaker family, the severely inbred family?
Oh, yeah.
That's I think it's like 4 generations, maybe 5, I think. But basically, so and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, because I never want to misspeak. I know my beliefs are grandiose, but I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to speak something incorrectly intentionally. Now, my understanding is we have 15 to 45 genetic mutations per generation, per life cycle, per reproductive cycle, which is remarkable. 6 billion base pairs, it doesn't happen right away. That's good. We don't immediately, degrade into nothing. But if I have 45 mutations and then my wife doesn't have those mutations, we can have an offspring that doesn't negatively, recapitulate those issues. Now, if my sister is my mate and she has those same mutations because she got them from our parents, when we reproduce, I don't have a sister, this is a thought experiment, then our mutation that came from the parent is passed down, that doesn't get fixed, and then a new series is added, a new series of mutations. And so then my son and daughter reproduce, and my parents' mutations and our mutations are added, and then their kids' mutations are added. And so you end up with a feedback loop of mutations, and they aggregate very quickly. So this is why inbreeding is so frowned upon, because if you don't have the diversity to offset it, it's like purebred dogs. Same idea. Am I wrong?
So the major issue with inbreeding is that many dangerous alleles are recessive, so they can be masked because somebody you're not closely related to, we're all technically related, whether you believe what you believe or what I believe, somebody that you're not related to, as we think of it, they're going to have slightly different gene combinations, allele variances, or whatever. So the odds that you get 2 of the same recessive allele are really low. But with inbreeding, you dramatically increase the chance that those recessive alleles get inherited together. And it takes multiple generations for it to be like really devastating, but it does happen, and that's why. I think this is actually probably the single biggest fatal flaw with genetic entropy, because if genetic entropy is a thing, then inbreeding should protect the population from this from the genome going to entropy. But we know that inbreeding is the most catastrophic thing you can do, other than eating radioactive waste.
Why would you say that? I don't understand why.
Because if the original genome is the more pure genome, and it keeps getting worsened every generation because of mixing those genomes and that mutations accumulate, if you keep the inbreeding within one family, then you know that you're getting less genetic diversity. And if the original genome was the pure genome, then the best way to preserve the original genome or whatever is to keep it in the family.
Right. So I explained, by right I meant wrong. I explained a simplified version of it, and you seem to agree. You called it alleles instead of just mutations. So that's more specific, obviously. But the point is the same. My wife and I, if I have a mutation that she doesn't have, and she has a mutation that I don't have, when we reproduce, I thought it was a recombination, but obviously I need to research that a little bit more. When the chromosomes overlay, the damaged parts of mine are going to be fixed by the not damaged parts of hers, which is how I understand it.
Well, hers will just be expressed over yours, potentially,
okay,
unless it's a dominant allele. Then like if it's Huntington's or whatever, then it doesn't matter. If you get one copy, you're screwed.
Okay. So then if you're inbreeding, you have the already existing mutation that is in your genome, and your sister has the same one, and then you reproduce. So that one is certainly coming to the next child, plus the new mutations that we get through entropy. So you get the existing mutations that weren't able to be cleaned, and then you get the next level, and you have them both now. You have double mutations. How is that not right? How am I missing that?
Yeah, well, because if you want to slow down the rate at which new harmful mutations are, there's more of a, it's more from the viewpoint of the harmful mutations accumulating. If you want to try to negate as best you can, hold back the waters of harmful mutations, then inbreeding would be the best way to do that.
I just think either I'm misunderstanding it or your logic is flawed, because X breeding, we'll call it, it gives you an opportunity to correct that mistake. Inbreeding guarantees that being passed down hereditarily plus the new ones. It doesn't mean that because you're inbreeding, you're getting more mutations. It means you're getting the same amount that happens every generation. They've measured this. It's 12 to 45, depending on which scientist or which state that they're in currently with their research. Those are going to happen irrespective of who you're mating with. You are going to have those base pair mistakes.
True, but everybody has different ones is the point. So like I have like whatever, I have some sort of number of mutations or whatever, and I theoretically pass them down. Somebody else in a completely different family, they're going to have some changes as well, like approximately the same number of them on average, but in different locations. So by mixing with a different family, you are multiplying mutations in different sites within your genome. Whereas if you keep it in the family, you would slow that process down as much as possible. The only thing that could do better than that would be cloning.
Well, cloning would actually stop if you had a perfect information copying system, which is the DNA is fucking remarkably designed to do that. To only have 14 or 50 mutations in 6 billion is remarkable. But yeah, if you could perfectly copy a clone, then you would have no mutations. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think let me see if I understand your argument. You're saying this is an argument against genetic entropy. If genetic entropy were true, then inbreeding should fix that. And I'm saying either I don't understand you, which is possible. I think that no matter which way you go, your view or my view, inbreeding is going to always cause an acceleration of the mutation because you don't have the complementary gene to offset the entropy that's happening. So I don't understand how you're making the connection that this is a genetic entropy thing. Genetic entropy just states that, very simply, and I don't mean to oversimplify John Sanford's work here, and I could be wrong in oversimplifying it, but it states that if we accrue one mutation per generation, over time, we're going to aggregate mutations. 1,000 generations, now we have 1,000 mutations. Well, but it happens to be a much higher rate of mistake happening. You have 40, 15 to 40, depends on who you talk to. Some people say 100. We'll just make it easy. We'll say there's 25 mutations. I think that's a good, safe, middling number. Every generation where 25 base pairs, the information is getting corrupted. There's mutations in there. They're mostly neutral or deleterious. Very few to, I don't know if there's any beneficial. We could talk, that's a whole other conversation, but
we know there are beneficial mutations, but we don't have time to talk about them.
Right. It would take a long time to go through. So, and I'm only gonna be on for probably another 20 minutes or so. So, if over time you end up with more mutations, this is a very simple idea. The theory of evolution wants to posit that these random mistakes have created higher functionality, higher complexity over time. Genetic entropy says we were higher complex, we were a higher complex organism, and over time, the gene code is becoming corrupted by aggregated mutations. It's a very simple idea. Now, Kimura's work and the other people that are, the other scientists that are looking at this rate over time, granted, it's not showing an effect necessarily of, what would that be, 1% or 0.1% or whatever. There seems to be an equilibrium that is being reached by whatever this kind of process is. But we're still aggregating mutations. We still like, think about it like this, and then I'll stop yammering. You have a computer code that you get a brand new. I have a MacBook here. It's perfect, and it doesn't have any viruses, any cookies on it. It runs perfectly. Over time, it'll start to aggregate cookies and viruses and things, and eventually, it's going to stop. It's going to bog down. And it's going to be the blue screen of death, or whatever. Maybe MacBooks don't do that, and then it's going to shit out because when you damage, when the coding becomes corrupted, it doesn't work as well, and we are experiencing corruption in the gene code. And it's antithetical to the theory of evolution, and it totally fits with the laws of thermodynamics. Just is what we would expect it's what we would expect to have found if Adam was built with no errors, and now we are getting worse, and we're aggregating entropy, we're aggregating mutations, and we would see these kind of bottlenecks like I showed you with this chronology.
We're not getting worse because our population went from supposedly 8 to 8 billion. So we're not getting worse. If we were getting worse, we'd be in population decline.
No. That's not how that works.
What?
You think that we're getting better genetically? That's why we've been reproducing better? You think that we're fucking better
Well, I'm saying we're not.
That's why I have so many people?
Well, no, I'm saying that we're not getting worse genetically. Because if that were the case, our population would not have doubled like 4 times in the last 100 years.
Yeah, it would have, Eric. You think
how?
Holy shit. You think that we're better genetically than the modern Homo sapien that existed 300,000 years ago?
I don't even know what better genetically even means. We're different, but like better, I don't know what that even means. We probably have weaker immune systems, which is kind of irrelevant because we are not subject to all that much selection pressure, not as much selection pressure anyways, because we have technology,
Okay, well, I'll explain this to you. The advance in our population has nothing to do with increase in genetic functionality. No, we're the same. That's what.
But if our genome was crumbling to pieces, then you would see catastrophic plummets in populations.
Okay, so I explained that it's a very slow process, and we do see an offsetting equilibrium thing that's preventing it from just absolutely falling apart. But we are seeing it degrade. Now, this is a whole other conversation. I don't know if we have time. Neither of us will want to get into this. You're talking about life expectancy versus lifespan. And the only causation for anything about the human population increasing is better access to food, better access to medicine, better access to health, and in particular death at birth and infant death and mother death, these kind of things. That's the only reason. It has nothing to do with us getting better genetically. Like, our technology has gotten better. If you want to make the argument, like a Dennett argument, that like as our brain power takes more, our brain takes more power, and we're becoming smarter, we're becoming sicker, but we're technologically offsetting it, that's fine. But to make some sort of claim that like we're like, of course we're not de-evolving, look at how many people we are, that just has nothing to do with our genetics. It's entirely to do with advancements in
I think it absolutely does, because you can't diet your way out of a genetic condition. I mean, like there are some conditions where like, you can stave off the side effects with dietary changes or whatever. But like in general, you can't do anything about sickle cell anemia or Huntington's or whatever by changing your diet or whatever. What I was trying to say was if our genetics were falling apart generation after generation, and that would be compounded now that there are so many more people, you should see population crashes. But we only see population crashes because of environmental issues or war or famine and things like that. There isn't just whole-scale population collapse due to the genetics or whatever. We do see that happen. I'm not. Like, this is directly to your argument. We do see those population collapses with small populations in the wild, like of animals, because they don't have enough genetic diversity in order to maintain a population. So they crash. But if we're just continuously aggregating all of this genetic entropy, then we should see population crashes, but we don't. And if you're saying it hasn't happened yet, well, I don't know, it's like the second coming. Well, it's gonna happen, but we don't know when or whatever. Like, theoretically that's a prediction, but it's a prediction that you never have to hold yourself accountable to, because we don't know when it's going to happen.
Right. Well, that's why I said you're strawmanning my argument. I think that God built this. This is totally subjective, so I can't point to a verse in the Bible to say this, but I think God built this thing for, let's just throw a number on it, like 20,000 years. It's not to exceed that. It has like a expiration date on it, including humankind. According to John Sanford's work, which obviously you disagree with, he's much smarter than you and I in this field. He said 10,000 years, and he doesn't think humans will be able to reproduce, basically. That's the direction. That's the rate that we're talking about. So we go from 900 years with Adam, then the crazy bottleneck at the flood 5,300 years ago. So from that moment till humans mutate out of the ability to reproduce, 15,000 years, that's viable to me. I mean, I would say even 20, 25, whatever, but none of this is, we should see in the last 3,000 years humans all having a population collapse. No. What would we see, though? We would see something like our gut bacteria is going extinct. According to the theory of evolution, we got a gut bacteria somehow. Bloop, bingo bongo, here's your fucking gut bacteria, thank you. And now it's being extincted. Now, obviously, this isn't necessarily genetic because that's not a part of the genome. It's environmental. Fine. It's being damaged heavily. Is this what's leading to tremendous increase in cancer? Potentially. Is this what's leading to tremendous increase in autoimmunity? Potentially. Rates of suicide? Potentially. I mean, there's a huge gut-brain connection. Our technology is better, but we are sicker. Absolutely. Like, anybody who disagrees with that, just, I don't know. I guess you watch too much TV. Humans, I'm 46. I was in the golf industry working with individuals from the World War II generation. Those sons of bitches were so strong. Their hands, if they didn't die in the war, they could smoke. They were chain smoking and they were 85 years old. They could all beat me up. They were all strong dudes. They're just different people. Humans are definitely sicklier than we have been. Now, I would say it's largely environmental, but we're physically not getting better, Eric. Nobody believes that we're getting better. We're not getting better. We're getting worse. And the theory of evolution posits that we did get better for an amount of time. We got more ordered, and these things happened that were beneficial, and now, bingo bongo, here we are. It doesn't comport with the laws of physics. It doesn't comport with how the universe works. Things get worse over time. I know I've said this 1,000 times. You've heard me say it. 120-year-old farm home. This is the original chimney, and we're in northern Maine now. I didn't know how bad northern Maine was on houses. Somebody built this brand new spick and span 120 years ago. Without me working on it, it may have fallen into the ground recently. We've had to do all the foundation stuff, all new studs everywhere, floor joists, everything. This house is a good example of what actually happens in this universe. You build a house, and over time, it gets worse. Human consciousness can come in and fix it and make it better or whatever. So we've done this technologically. We've been able to kind of pick it up, but we're physically devolving. To me, that's a fact.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't really have time to talk about it anymore. We did an hour and 15 minutes, and I haven't eaten supper yet, and it's 9:45.